morning, dear students. I am Miss NAVEDA SHAIKH from Brahan Mumbai Mahanagar Palika MCGM virtual class. I welcome all my dear students to another and interesting session. In today's session, we'll be learning something new and interesting from a science textbook. So let's get started. Good morning, dear students. I am Miss NAVEDA SHAIKH from MCGM virtual class. I welcome all my 9th standard students to another and interesting session. Today's class is for a new chapter, that is energy flow in an ecosystem. Now you have learned in your previous standards about what is an ecosystem, right? And if you do not remember it, do not worry. We'll first revise and then we'll continue ahead. So let's get started. Now in this chapter, we'll be learning about food chain and food web, the energy pyramid, biogeochemical cycle, and under that we'll be learning about carbon cycle, oxygen cycle and nitrogen cycle. Now you must be wondering that you have already learned about food chain and food web in your previous standard. So yes, we will be learning more about that. Okay, so let's begin. Now when you look at this picture, I would like my students to observe this picture and see what other components that you can see. Now, if you go on listing, you can see that there is water, you can see there's sun, heat, there's land, you can see trees, you can see animals, you can see plants, you can see insects. Okay, so in this picture, you can see living things as well as non-living things, right? So living things and non-living things together form an ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? There's a question in your textbook which helps us to understand that an ecosystem is a community of living organisms interacting with each other and their non-living environment. Now, if I tell you that in this picture there is water, there is air, right, there's soil, these are non-living components, but they are extremely useful to the living things as well. Okay? So when these both things, that is the living things के अंदर भी interaction बहुत होता है, like plants, animals, there is a huge interaction amongst themselves and amongst the non-living components as well. And when they come together, that is called as an ecosystem. So what makes up an ecosystem? All living things like plants, animals and bacteria, non-living things like the sun, rock and soil. Now what is an ecosystem is clear to all my students. Now we will be learning which are the different types of ecosystem. Now this all you have already learned, but I'll just quickly revise which are the different ecosystem known to you all. The first ecosystem that we're talking about is grassland ecosystem. Here you can see that animals, plants, where you find abundant amount of grass and open space where you can find mostly wild animals. That type of ecosystem is called as grassland ecosystem. Then you have tundra ecosystem where you have, it is usually found in the North Pole and the South Pole region where you have great amount of snowfall and there's too much of the temperature is very low. Here, this type of ecosystem is called as tundra ecosystem. Next is marine ecosystem, which is related to the sea waters. Okay, the plants and animals surviving there are called as, that ecosystem is called as marine ecosystem. The next ecosystem is the desert ecosystem. Here, the different types of plants which are present in the desert region are very different from the normal plants that we see on land. Okay, that you see around you, that is very different from the cactus and other thorny plants which are found in the desert region. And apart from that, even the animal skin, their structure are very different, right? So this is another type of ecosystem, that is the desert ecosystem. Then you have freshwater ecosystem, which comprises of fresh water. Now remember, sea water, just the salty water that we talk about, is called as the marine ecosystem. Whereas streams, rivers, ponds and lakes, they have fresh water. Okay? It is not salty. So this type of water bodies which have plants and animals in them, this is called as freshwater ecosystem. The last one that we have learned was forest ecosystem. In forest, you have different types of animals and different types of insects, plants, huge variety of plants, insects, birds, animals, trees, everything has a variety over there. So that type of ecosystem is called as forest ecosystem. Now there is also interaction between all animals and plants living in the forest, and hence it is called as a forest ecosystem. How do interaction take place between biotic and abiotic factors of an ecosystem? As I told you in the very beginning when we were learning about what is an ecosystem, I mentioned that there are two components, that is biotic and abiotic factors. Now as you see here, you can see first thing that is there is the sun and rain, soil. These are all non-living components, right? These non-living components are called as abiotic components. Whereas the living things that you can see like the plants, rabbit, antelope, and you can see a mouse, you can see birds, you can see animals like bear, wolf, squirrel. Now these are all living organisms. Okay? Even the mushroom and insects and worms, these are all living components, and that is why they are called as biotic components. Okay? So the biotic components refers to all life in an ecosystem. Ecosystem में जितनी भी living organisms है, that comes under biotic components. So based on nutrition, biotic components can be categorized as autotrophs, heterotrophs, and saprotrophs or decomposers. Okay, you have learned about what are autotrophs, you have learned about what is heterotrophs, what are saprophytes, you have learned about all this. Okay, and if you do not remember, we will just quickly revise about that as well. Now, abiotic components include sunlight, temperature, nutrients, wind, minerals, water, air. These are all things which come under abiotic components, which are extremely important for all the living things as well. Okay, so everything goes hand in hand. Everybody is dependent upon each other, whether living thing or non-living thing. So, when we talk about biotic and abiotic factors in an ecosystem, this graph, if you remember, this flowchart, if you remember, it will be easier for you all. Now, ecosystem has two components, biotic factors and abiotic factors. Abiotic factors, as I told you previously also, are the non-living aspects. They are not further divided, okay? But biotic factors, we have three things that you need to remember. That is the producers, the consumers, and the decomposers. Producers are plants. Consumers are further divided into three things. That is primary consumers, that are herbivores, secondary consumers, that are carnivores, and tertiary consumers, that are secondary carnivores. Okay. And the third biotic factor is decomposers like worms, fungi, bacteria. These are all coming under decomposers, which decomposes, which breaks down the dead and decaying organism into simpler substances, and then it provides it to the soil again. Okay? So this is how the interaction actually takes place between biotic and abiotic factors in an ecosystem. So let's quickly revise about what is a producer. Now we have all learned that plants are the only source of energy to all living organisms. Why do I say this? Because animals cannot make their own food. Plants can make their own food in the presence of sunlight with the help of green colored pigment called chlorophyll present in leaves and using carbon dioxide and water from air. This process is called photosynthesis. Directly or indirectly, animals depend on plants for their food. Plants are the main support of every food chain. Okay, so producers are extremely important as I told you, because these are the only thing which can produce energy and absorb the energy from the sun, and in turn the animals depend upon them directly or indirectly. Okay, like herbivores need plants for the survival, whereas carnivores need the herbivorous plant animals which are dependent on plants. So that way plant are the basic thing which is required to in order to obtain energy by all living organisms. The next one that we have is the herbivores. Now if you see the animals which feed on grass or leaves or fruits, vegetables, they come under primary consumers or herbivores. Okay? So remember that this examples here, that is a grasshopper, squirrel, elephant, etc. they are directly dependent on autotrophs, that are the producers. ठीक है? तो जितने भी चीजें यहाँ पर आप लोग देख रहे हो वो सब प्रोड्यूसर पे डायरेक्टली डिपेंडेंट है. Next we have is another type of animal which is dependent upon the herbivorous animals, right? So these are called as carnivores. They are dependent on animals that feed on plants. Okay? So carnivorous animals are animals that depend on other animals for their food are carnivores. Okay, they are dependent indirectly on plants for their food. Example are animals that feed on herbivores are predators. Animals that feed on insects are insectivores. Okay, so this is how the next level is classified here. The third one is omnivore. These are the animals which come at the apex or the top consumers. Example is tiger, lion, etc. These consumers are use herbivores and carnivores as their food. No other animal feeds on top carnivores. अब इनके ऊपर कोई और इन पे feed नहीं करना पसंद करता है. ठीक है? The last one that we have is saprophytes or the decomposers. They break down like the fungus, the bacteria. They break down the substances into simpler substances. Okay, so here you can clearly see they are utilizing the dead and decaying organism and they are getting nutrition from that, and they are decomposing the dead part, that dead material that was placed, and it provides it to the soil. Okay, so this is how the next level is discussed. Now let's understand the energy flow in an ecosystem. Now, when you see, when I explained you all about how the plant is getting energy from the sun, okay? Sun is the basic source of energy on our planet. Why do I say this? Because sun से plants को energy मिलती है. They use sunlight to prepare their food. अब ये plants जो है वो further क्या करते हैं? They are useful for the animals like the herbivores. Like here you can see in this picture, the rabbits or the mouse, they depend upon the plants, right? These animals, that is the herbivores, are dependent upon on the plants, and the carnivores are dependent upon the herbivores. Next, when they die, the decomposers are very important because they break down the animals, dead bodies, and it gives the nutrients to the soil, and the plant again uses these inorganic nutrients and produces fruits, vegetables, and grows into a new plant. Okay, so the mode of nutrition into producers, consumers, saprotrophs, and decomposers, how the nutrition is flowing through each and every level is called as the energy flow in an ecosystem. Here, that is energy flow through the ecosystem. Now, if you see, the sun is providing heat energy to the plant, and along with that, the plant is producing uh, food for the animals, that are the consumers. Now, when they are consuming food, they give out heat, and you can see how the energy is flowing from one level to the other. From sun, it was going on to the producers, that are the plants. From the plant, it is going on to the first primary consumer, that are the herbivores, and from the herbivores, it is going on to the tertiary or the second level of consumers or the decomposers, and from the decomposer, the uh, it is getting converted into inorganic nutrient pool, which again is useful for the producers. Okay, so this way the energy is flowing from every level of the ecosystem. Now, plants are called producers because they produce carbohydrates from carbon dioxide, water, and the sun energy. Consumers get their energy by feeding on producers or other consumers. Decomposition is the breakdown of waste and dead organism by organisms called decomposers through the process of biodegradation. Okay? So I hope this is clear to all my students how the energy flows in an ecosystem. So in short, we can say that food chain are nothing but they are the connecting links between plants and animals. Okay, so all living things, that is plants and animals, are connected to each other. हर एक चीज एक दूसरे से connected है. Example, grass is connected to grasshopper and the grasshopper is connected to the birds. So plant synthesizes food in sunlight. Remember this. A grasshopper eats grass and is eaten up by a bird. Each component is a link in a food chain. The interdependence of living things among themselves for food forming a chain is called a food chain. Okay? Very simple to remember. Food chain. It is a very interesting topic here, so pay attention to it. The interaction which goes on continuously between the producers, consumers, and saprophytes, there is a definite sequence in this interaction which is called the food chain. Now here if you see, the sun is producing energy and it is absorbed by the plants. Okay, the plants are giving this is used the energy produced by the plants are used by the primary consumers, and the primary consumers like the grasshopper is eaten up by the secondary consumer, that is the frog. Okay, this frog is the secondary consumer, is now eaten up by the tertiary consumer, that is the snake. Now when these animals die, they are decomposed with the help of fungus, bacteria and worms. Okay, so they form a chain. There is a proper chain that you see, and that is why it is known as a food chain. Okay, so I hope food chain is clear and understood to you all. Now there are a few examples of food chain here in this picture. You can see that there is a flower which is eaten up by a caterpillar, that is a consumer. Then this caterpillar eats the frog, that is another consumer. This frog is eaten up by a snake, and the snake is then eaten up by a owl. So this is a food chain. The next food chain is a maize, that is the producer. It's eaten up by a grasshopper or a locust. Now this is a primary consumer. This is another, then it is eaten up by another organism, that is a lizard. That is a secondary consumer, and this lizard is eaten up by a snake, that is the tertiary consumer. Same thing happens underwater also. You have living organism underwater as well, and they also have a food chain. So the primary consumers are small tiny plants which are there, and animals which are capable of producing energy by themselves because they possess chlorophyll in them. These are then eaten up by the primary consumers, that is the prawns or the shrimps that are there, which is then eaten up by the secondary consumer. Okay, slightly bigger fishes, and then tertiary consumers, and then quaternary consumers. Okay, you all can see how the level keeps on increasing. And this is how the food chain looks like. Let's understand a very simple food chain here. Here you have the first thing that is marked is the grass. Now the grasshopper eats the plant, right? The grasshopper is eaten up by a mice. Next, the snake eats the mice. Fourth, the eagle eats the snake. When the hawk dies, fungi breaks the body down and turns into nutrients. Okay? The nutrients along with sun and water causes the grass to grow again. So this is how the food chain works. Now every link over here is very important, and it forms like a chain, and that is why the name is given as food chain. Let us see one example of food chain here. You can see this insect is being eaten up by a chameleon. Now this chameleon is in turn eaten up by a bird. This bird is eaten up by another animal. Okay, and when this animal tends to die, it will decompose and form nutrient for the other plant. Next is the food web. An organism may be the prey for many other organisms. Now, um, if you keep a deer in front of a lion, a tiger, okay, cheetah, so here you can see that there are three different animals, but they can feed on the same deer, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि एक पर्टिकुलर ऑर्गेनिज्म है तो वो उसी को ही खाएगा, वो एक चेन ही चलेगी, नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है, बहुत सारी चेन्स एक दूसरे से इंटरकनेक्टेड होती है। ओके, नाउ सपोज इफ देयर इज अ ग्रास हॉपर को बहुत सारे एनिमल्स खा सकते हैं, ठीक है, सिर्फ फ्रॉग खाए ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है। सेम वे अगर एक प्लांट है तो प्लांट को सिर्फ ग्रास हॉपर खाएगा या कैटरपिलर खाएगा, ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है। देयर आर मेनी एनिमल्स व्हिच आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन प्लांट एंड दे कैन ईट देम। ओके, एंड देन this is interconnected with many other animals and plants as well. That is why there forms an intricate system over here. एक जो अगर फोटो देखोगे तो ये बहुत कंफ्यूजिंग फोटो दिखता है, जैसे कि एक वेब, ठीक है, वेब मीन द स्पाइडर वेब जब हम लोग देखते हैं तो इसी तरीके से दिखाई देता है ना, समझ में नहीं आता है कि कौन सी चीज कहाँ जा रही है। सो व्हेन एन ऑर्गेनिज्म falls a prey, it cannot fall a prey to only one animal at a time, ठीक है, there could be many other animals as well, तो उन सब के लिए वो एप्लीकेबल है, ये वो सब उसे खा सकते हैं। For example, an insect feeds upon leaves of various plants, but the same insect is the prey for different animals like frog, wall lizard, birds, etc. If this is to be shown in the figure like this, it will form an intricate web instead of a linear food chain. Such an intricate network is called a food web. Generally, food webs are found everywhere in nature. ठीक है, as I told you, अगर एक insect है तो जरूरी नहीं है कि insect ही plants को खाएंगे. There are other animals also which can eat plants, and then this chain keeps on getting confusing because कोई भी animal किसको भी खा सकता है. ऐसे particular ऐसा नहीं है कि इसी को ही खाएगा. If I talk about a bird or a snake, snakes, rats को भी खा सकते हैं. Snakes can eat frogs also. Okay, they can even eat deer as well, ठीक है, so you cannot imagine how strong a python is. So that helps us understand about the food web, ठीक है, बहुत सारी food chains when they come together and they form an intricate system, it is called as a food web. Okay, so a few more examples of food web here you can see. In a desert food web you can see the cactus plant, which is the primary producer, is eaten up by insects also, by snakes, by small lizard and kangaroo rats. They eat this primary producers. Now this kangaroo rat can be eaten up by a desert fox, it can be eaten up by a snake, it can be eaten by a hawk as well, right? So एक animal को बहुत सारे animals खा सकते हैं. The snake is eaten up by a hawk or a desert fox. ठीक है, फिर यहाँ पे कंफ्यूजन हो रहा है, बट डो नॉट वरी, यू जस्ट हैव टू बी वेरी अटेंटिव व्हाइल ड्राइंग अ फूड वेब. ओके, टेकिंग वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल, आप लोगों को एनिमल्स या फिशेस ड्रॉ करने की जरूरत नहीं है, यू जस्ट हैव टू नेम इट आल्सो. इफ यू नेम इट, इट विल बी easier and it is acceptable as well. Okay, so food web underwater, you can see that there are the animals which are feeding on plants as well, and there are phytoplanktons which are very minute microscopic organisms which are capable of producing chlorophyll. They have chlorophyll in them and they can prepare their own food. They are eaten up by smaller fishes. These smaller fishes are eaten up by a larger fish. ठीक है, वैसा नहीं है कि जो बड़ी फिश है ये सिर्फ फिश को ही खाएगी. इट कैन ईट plants as well. ठीक है, so this becomes like a web and that is why these are called as food web. Let's understand about what is a food web. Okay, in simple words, the food chains are interlinked. Okay, when there are many food chains which are interlinked, the one living thing can be a part of many food chains. The interlinking of several food chains form a food web. Simple है, so remember this example. Here, the next interesting topic is the energy pyramid. As I told you that each and every organism, when they consume food, they give out energy. Okay? Like the plants which are preparing the food, they give out energy. And how are they giving out energy? Because the consumers are eating it up. Okay? So energy is getting transferred from one level to the other. This transfer of energy is called as tropic level. Okay? So let's understand about this level also in detail. Now, what do you mean by tropic level? Now at the very base, you can see plants are there. Okay, so those are autotrophs which produce energy by photosynthesis. That is called as tropic level 1. Each level in the food chain is called a tropic level. A tropic level is the step at which the organism obtains its food in the chain. The amount of matter and energy gradually decreases from producers at lowest level to consumers at the top, which is the highest level. तो आप लोग नीचे देखोगे तो number of plants is much more as compared to the consumers, the tertiary consumers which are at the top. ठीक है? Now this each level of the energy pyramid that you see is called as tropic level. The first tropic level has the producers, that are the plants. The second level has herbivores which consume plants. The third level is the carnivores which consume plant eating animals. And the fourth one is large carnivores or omnivores consume smaller animals. ठीक है? So I hope now tropic level is clear to all my students. Next we move on is the pyramid of energy. Now you remember the pyramid that I had shown you all. Here you see at the base is the producer, that is the plant. Now the energy transfers that takes place at each tropic level. There are different levels of energy exchange in the food chain. हर एक लेवल पे एनर्जी एक्सचेंज होती है. ठीक है, फ्रॉम प्रोड्यूसर्स इट गोज ऑन टू द प्राइमरी कंज्यूमर्स, फ्रॉम द प्राइमरी कंज्यूमर्स it goes on to the secondary consumers, from secondary consumer it goes to the tertiary consumer, and each level heat is given up. ठीक है, so there are different levels of energy exchange in the food chain. The initial quantity of energy goes on decreasing at every level. ठीक है, energy keeps on decreasing at each and every level as you go up. Similarly, the number of organisms also decreases from the lowest level to the highest level. Everybody can notice the number of plants are more as compared to the number of deers or tigers or foxes. Okay? So this is one more important point that you need to remember. Similarly, the number of organisms also decreases from the lowest level to the highest level. This pattern of energy exchange is an ecosystem, is called a pyramid of energy. Okay? Simple है. Now this brings us to a gist of whatever we learned today. The sun is the ultimate source of energy on earth. Remember this. It provides the earth required for all plant life. It is required as an energy source by all the plants that are there. The plants utilize this energy for the process of photosynthesis. Plants sunlight use करते हैं for photosynthesis, which is used to synthesize their food. During this biological process, the light energy is converted into chemical energy and it is passed on through successive levels. Means from the sun, the energy is going into the plants and these plants are then converting into light energy into chemical energy. Okay. So the flow of energy from a producer to the consumer and eventually to an apex predator or a detritivore is called the food chain. Dead and decaying matter along with organic debris is broken down into its constituents by scavengers. Scavengers are nothing but crow, vultures, small worms which are there, which are breaking down the dead and decaying matter, okay, into organic substances. The reducers then absorb the constituents. After the producers, what will they do? They will absorb the constituents that are broken down by the decomposers. ठीक है, decomposers जो भी डेड और डिकेइंग एनिमल्स होते हैं जो उसे डिकम्पोज करते हैं तो वो कहाँ जाता है? इट गोज इनटू द सॉइल. ठीक है, नाउ हियर यू कैन सी द secondary consumer is eaten up by the fungus and its body gets broken down into simpler substances which is very good for the soil as it acts as a nutrient to the soil. ठीक है, now after that, after gaining the energy, the producers liberate molecules to the environment which can be utilized again by the producers. Okay, so after gaining the energy from the decomposers or the reducers, they liberate molecules to the environment which can be utilized again by the producers. ठीक है, तो ये जो nutrients breakdown हो रहा है decomposers जो कर रहे हैं तो वो soil में mix होता है और सॉइल में मिक्स होने की वजह से प्रोड्यूसर्स को फिर से वो न्यूट्रिएंट्स मिलते हैं, ठीक है. So I hope all these things are clear to you all. What is a food chain? What is a food web? What is the meaning of energy pyramid? What is tropic level? I hope things are clear to you all now. In the next coming period, we'll be learning something new and interesting. Till then, thank you. If you liked the session, please do not forget to subscribe to our channel so that you can share and view the videos that we had today for you. And please do not forget to hit the bell icon so that you remain updated with all the latest videos that we'll be making for our dear students.
This session was quite useful to you. In the next coming period, we'll learn something new and interesting. Till then, thank you.